It's an 87th Precinct podcast. This is the only podcast in the world dedicated to Ed McBain's seminal series of police procedural novels, which began in 1956 with Cop Hater and ended in 2005 with Fiddlers. There were 55 books in the series, and today's podcast looks at book number 31, So Long As You Both Shall Live. To review the book, I'm joined by my two best men, Mr. Morgan Something Borrowed Brown.
Hello there.
And Mr. Stephen Something Old Royston.
Oh, that was very... I'm not even the oldest.
I know, but I write the introductions.
But in fact, I'm the youngest.
That's true.
Well, my name is
after
Paul...
that.
Oh, blimey. I'm sorry, Stephen. I didn't want to call you Something Blue, because that's...
I was really enjoying it until that line then. I thought it was a great introduction.
Well, as I say, my name is Paul Abbott, and I will be your wedding DJ today, playing songs you don't want to hear at volumes you can't listen at, whilst you wait for some buffet snacks to come out.
Oh, brilliant.
But remember, you can visit us at Twitter, Facebook and Instagram by searching for Hark87podcast. You can email us at hark87podcast@gmail.com. And if you want to help us out, then please leave us a review on whatever podcast app you use, but especially Apple Podcasts, because that's very helpful for us reaching more people. And before we get going, I've got a couple of things to promote. One is a podcast called Round the Archives, run by Lisa and Andrew, who have very kindly let me and my voice feature on the new episode. So this is an archive TV podcast, mainly British stuff, but occasionally venturing a bit further afield. And I have taken them over to the NBC studios in 1961 to talk about the 87th Precinct TV series. That has been released this weekend, as this podcast is being recorded. So if you search for Round the Archives on your podcast apps and look for episode 42, the new episode, you can hear me on there amongst many other contributors talking all about archive TV stuff. So definitely dig that out and have a listen. And also, I've been reading a book, which I've got to write a review of soon, called Sticking It to the Man, Revolution and Counterculture in Pulp and Popular Fiction, 1950 to 1980. Edited by Andrew Nett and Ian McIntyre. It's a follow-up to the book I think I mentioned on this years ago, probably now, called Girl Gangs and Biker Boys, which was about youth culture in pulp and had some good Evan Hunter stuff in it. But if you're looking for a book, it would make a good present, this book, it would. If you're looking for a book that's all about pulp fiction, about revolution, about social issues, lots of stuff about gay life, black life, Aboriginal life. It's got quite a nice sort of, lots of Australian stuff in there as well. And it's got tons of great illustrations of pulp book covers and things like that. That's really worth looking up. Lots of people who listen to this would definitely appreciate that book. So it's called Sticking It to the Man, Revolution and Counterculture in Pulp and Popular Fiction, 1950 to 1980, and no further. But it is great.
Stops mid-sentence.
Yeah, as the clock ticks over. But let's get stuck into the world of 1976 and McBain's world. You're interested to know what's going on in outside of the 87th Precinct?
As always.
Mr. Evan Hunter?
Yeah.
There is a novel comes out called The Chisholms, a novel of the Journey West, which is like a frontier-type programme, I think. Book. I say programme because it eventually became the basis for a TV miniseries.
All right.
Yeah, I think I've seen that, yeah.
Oh, dear.
Well, now you've just said that, that definitely rings a bell.
Well,
I wonder if that's a talking pictures thing, actually. Anyway.
It was 45 minutes times 13 episodes that was made in the late 70s.
Who was in it?
I haven't got that information to hand.
Yeah, I'm fairly certain I've seen snippets of that.
I wonder if it'd be one of these ones that crops up on something like, what do they call it?
Lots of wagons moving around. That
Yeah,
type
it'll
of
be a
thing.
wagon train type thing.
It was a
definitely?
CBS thing, so there are a few channels in the UK that you sometimes just get. It's just full of westerns, isn't there? Some of them.
Dennis Weaver, somebody like that would have been in it.
So, well, that would be interesting. But yeah, so that's his big novel. He also has a novel as Ed McBain called Guns, which I have read and can't remember anything about.
Likewise.
But I believe it contains some reference to the events of See Them Die. So I don't know whether he's crossing over worlds there, because that's not an 87th Precinct novel. He also puts out a novel called Me and Mr. Stenner, which is an Evan Hunter novel. which is all about a stepdaughter learning to accept her stepfather and maintain her relationship with her birth father, which is clearly based on the fact that a couple of years before, Evan Hunter had remarried, got divorced and remarried to Mary Van Hunter, and her daughter Amanda Finley lived with them. So clearly that is about the relationship, because Evan Hunter adopted her as his daughter, essentially, but this book is clearly about that. And that was also adapted by CBS in the 80s.
Crikey.
Then there was a couple of short stories published in Ellery Queen's Mystery Magazine, Mystery Monthly, which were, I think, extracts of bits and pieces. One called What Happened to Annie Barnes. The one called Stepfather, clearly a bit of Me and Mr. Stenner, and Consolation, which I'm not sure about. But there were no film or TV adaptations in 1976 of any.
He must have written pretty much non-stop.
Definitely, yeah.
I think he basically did it as a job. He got up in the morning, went to his shed, his writing room, and did that until tea time, 5 days a week.
So some of what he produced became something, and others didn't, I suppose. Yeah.
So he was constantly trying to write plays that never seemed to get anywhere. But so if you ever look through the Evan Hunter archive listings of stuff, there's a lot of things in there that never saw the light of day.
Yeah.
I still feel like we need a revival of that musical that was mentioned a little while ago.
Yeah, well...
Imagine a musical version of the 87th Precinct.
Yes! I'm imagining it already.
Well, there are some books that deal with music, aren't there?
Coming
up in the 80s.
Now you've reminded us.
Yeah. Anyway, this So Long As You Both Shall Live came out in Random House in 1976, Signet 1977.
Hamish Hamilton, I bet.
Hamish Hamilton in 1976 in the UK, and the UK paperback was Pan 1978. Do you want to do a couple of little bits about 76 in general?
Go on then.
Any ideas of what happened in 1976?
1976. What happened?
Punk and that.
Punk and that. We might talk a bit more about that in the bonus episode.
We will. That's all I can think of.
Carter was elected, I suppose, November even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Jimmy Carter defeated Gerald Ford in the presidential election.
Mm-hmm.
In the UK, Harold Wilson resigns.
He did, yeah.
Callaghan takes over. We've got the death of two grand figures of creativity, one being Agatha Christie.
Oh, crikey, yeah.
So
I thought you meant like Charles Darwin or somebody. I thought, I'm sure he died before then. And God, he'd also passed away.
But in April, Sid James of the Carry On films died.
Oh, my goodness, what a momentous occasion for this podcast.
Yeah. Well, he died on stage, and of course, because he's a comedian, everyone thought it was a bit. He thought he was doing a bit. But, if you're going to go as an actor/comedian...
I wonder how old he was. Perhaps he's one of those people who wasn't quite as old as he looked.
He always looked very old.
But he did, didn't he? Yeah.
He always looked the same age as well, weirdly.
Yeah. Let's see what else we've got. Oh, there's a couple of things here. First ever commercial Concorde flight happened in January of 76, even though the plane had been tested and trialled over the previous years. The Intercity 125, fully introduced on the train lines of the UK.
Oh, exciting stuff.
And a motorway was completed. Can you guess which motorway? Here's a hint. It's the nearest motorway to us.
The M62.
Yes. The M62, which had been started in 1960, was completed officially in 1976. At a length of 107 miles.
Oof.
A motorway which you've probably travelled on a billion times.
A lot. Many times indeed. As recently as yesterday.
In fact, I was on it today as well. So let's get away from the broad things. Let's get stuck into the book, So Long As You Both Shall Live, which is dedicated to Jack Scoville.
Oh, yeah.
Who
he invented the Scoville scale, I'm going to say.
You can say that.
Chili heat.
Famed for chili measurement. It wasn't that Scoville, no.
Rats.
He was a literary agent who was clearly a friend of Evan Hunter's, because he began his career at the Scott Meredith Literary Agency, where Evan Hunter basically started his career.
That would make sense.
So apparently he was a very well-liked man, so I presume they were just friends, because I don't think he was his agent. He wasn't McBain's agent at all. So, but anyway, that's who the book's dedicated to. He only died in 2012. But before we get to the words in the book, we do know that this is one of the 2 McBain books that was adapted to become a Columbo episode.
Oh, right,
I
okay.
bet that went well.
Well, as we have established before, the Columbo adaptations of these books are not well thought of at all.
It's such a shame that your 2 favourite things are like when they met were disastrous. It's
Yeah.
a big shame, that.
I did watch it not long ago when I got the Columbo box set, because this one doesn't crop up on telly at all. It's called No Time to Die on the TV adaptation of it.
Well, like an 80s one, or...
It's 90s. They're
No.
both 90s ones. And it rarely comes up on television, this one, because it doesn't follow the formula. It doesn't follow the Columbo formula.
Oh, so you don't know who's done it?
Well, it's just the story. It's just the McBain story. There's not the
Oh,
there's not the classic we see the murder first setup.
So the baddie's some no-mark, is it? Or is it some...
Well, it says it is in the book. Really.
No, I mean the actor.
Yeah, I think so.
Big letdown.
It's not Robert Culp or anything like that. Not Patrick McGowan. Anything good like that. The difference between this book and the Columbo thing is obviously all the cast of detectives are squashed down into Peter Falk. So Peter Falk is playing, Corella and Fat Ollie. And,
Oh, God.
Yeah. Arthur Brown and everything like that. You lose that dynamic.
Which is where a lot of the enjoyment of the book comes from, obviously, the interplay between the detectives.
Yeah, and it's the wedding of Columbo's nephew, Detective Andy Palmer.
Andy Palmer?
Yes. Parma, not Palmer.
Okay.
So Kling becomes Detective Andy Palmer, who's the nephew of Columbo. But the stool pigeon Fats Donner is in the Columbo adaptation, except they've changed his name to Tubby Comfort.
It's nuts, isn't it, the stuff they do?
That's very peculiar.
Why you would keep that character in and just call him Tubby Comfort. Amazing.
Very peculiar.
Right. Initial thoughts, gentlemen. Is this a holiday special from McBain, this one?
What?
As in, when a long-running TV show has to do a holiday special?
Or does like a bit of a dafty?
Yeah.
A little bit, yeah.
We've already had one wedding-based book, haven't we?
Yeah.
In Till Death.
The trouble with the plots that revolve around something like a wedding, they're all, on the face of it, a bit contrived, really, aren't they? Kind of...
Yeah.
They feel a bit silly. But having read it yesterday for the second time in one blast, and then finishing it only a few hours ago, I found it quite enjoyable to read, actually.
It's definitely not as silly as the other wedding one.
No, it isn't.
It's got a bit more of a feel of the novels around it in the sequence. I think it's because the other one's largely pretty much farcical, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
It's like a farce, except it's got murders in.
What helps this? It helps move on Fat Ollie's character a bit as well, so you get to know a bit more. And he does probably a lot more than Corella in this, I think. Just about. You get the impression of that anyway.
Yeah, I think Fat Ollie generates a lot of the interest in the novel, really, doesn't
Yeah,
he?
so it's quite good for that.
So the overview of the story is essentially it's Bert Kling and Augusta Blair's wedding day. She gets kidnapped. They don't know by whom. They don't get a ransom demand, and it's how are they going to find her? Because obviously something bad's going to happen, and it's the chase to figure out what's happened because they've got nothing to go on. Which is a simple enough premise for the thing. There's always, in my mind, a bit of a problem involving the people affected by a case in the investigation of a case. But I suppose if you've got a wedding full of cops, they're going to be doing the investigating.
I guess so, yeah.
So I don't know. Because it's everyone. It's a bit of a hail, hail, the gang's all here situation, isn't it? Everyone's at this wedding, that has been named in the books more or less.
Pretty much.
Yeah, he could have pulled more. He does slim it down for the actual most of the investigation, though, helpfully, because then it would be a bit silly if they're all running around. But
because you've definitely got at the wedding, you've obviously got Kling because he's getting married. You've definitely got Corella, who's his best man. You've got Bob O'Brien.
Oh,
Would you bring Bob O'Brien to a wedding? You don't end up shooting somebody.
Hal Willis is there.
Hal Willis is there. Pete Burns is there, Maya Myers there,
Andy
Parker's there.
I think because there was some debate about whether he'd have to invite Andy Parker, wasn't there, previously? And I think he said, "Oh well, even Andy Parker, really? Yeah, we'll have to invite."
Well, he said, because he said if I don't, and then we're on we're paired on an investigation, and I don't want him to think about me not inviting him to my wedding.
Yeah.
So,
but that's the only role that Parker plays in this story is basically to be at the wedding.
Yep.
He's not like he's involved in the investigation, is it, particularly?
no.
Indeed, which is probably for the best.
But we do get, in the course of the investigation, you get Arthur Brown comes in. We assume he's at the wedding somewhere, but he's not in the opening sequence. And Captain Frick is out of the precinct house. We haven't had him in anything for ages.
That's one of my favourite bits in this was the passage with Captain Frick. 'Cause I think he's always quite good value.
It does tend to be.
This senile guy who's in charge of the entire precinct.
So the question that's asked quite a lot, and it was asked to McBain over and over again over the years, was, why are you so cruel to Bert Kling? And, all you have to do is, we're 31 books into the sequence. The first time we meet Kling, he gets shot. Second time we meet him, second book, he's betrayed by his old acquaintance, but meets his first partner. And they trundle along for a bit, and then she's killed. Then he meets someone else, starts dating her. He's then violently assaulted, and she dumps him. Then he meets Augusta Blair, proposes, and we've reached book 31. They get married. She gets kidnapped.
Yep.
Poor old Bert. Poor young Bert.
And what was his answer to why he was always mean to him?
I don't know. I don't think he ever said that. He just used to talk about old ladies writing him letters saying, when are you going to be nice? When's Bert going to be happy? It's like, I think he just enjoyed torturing him. Having a character that should have everything. He's handsome, he's young, he was quickly promoted,
Maybe he's the opposite of Corella in everything always works out for... Ooh, bit of a spoiler there, I suppose. For Corella, really.
Yeah. He just had to pour horror onto someone, and Bert gets the worst of it, I think. I mean, obviously Steve gets shot a lot. But
Yeah. But he always pulls through anyway.
So, let's go through the story a little bit. Start at the reception of the wedding.
Oh, yeah.
With a photographer who can't remember the groom's name.
Yeah, he gets about 4 different versions, possibly even 5, doesn't he? In the course of that.
I think it's quite a clever little writing trick, actually, because in the first paragraph, Kling is called Bart, and you read it and you're going, "Oh, it's a misprint."
Yeah, I almost didn't notice it. I kind of did a bit of a double take, and then
there's another 3 or 4 occasions where he's given a different name, Boyd or something like that.
Yeah, he's definitely Boyd, possibly twice, I think.
Because the photographer's
Bud.
photographer's only got eyes for Augusta because she's a model that he knows.
And you think he's a real rival, and then he goes on to say Alexander Pike was 64 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, right.
It's a very good opening sequence to
It
tell it
is.
through the eyes of the photographer.
Yeah, it's a really good ploy, that, I think, yeah.
It's a red herring, a huge red herring.
Well, because you're immediately suspicious of this guy, aren't you?
Yeah, because he doesn't want Augusta to marry someone else. I'll tell you one thing that is great about this story is it is, for the fan of the series, it is chock full of references back to other things, that some of which I don't think he's ever re-mentioned again. I think, like, Teddy's butterfly tattoo that she gets in The Con Man. I don't think that's been mentioned, perhaps once.
Yeah, it crops up very rarely, but yeah, it was nice to get a little mention of that in. There's a lot of just little nods to different parts of the series, aren't there? Even from sort of, years and years back.
Because wedding guests include Art and Leslie Cutler, the
agency, aren't they? Yeah.
Fashion agency people who've appeared in 2 or 3 stories now as incidental characters. So the photographer's in there as a huge stinking red herring right at the start. And obviously when your wedding reception finishes, you go up to your hotel room and have a shower and come back and your bride's missing.
Obviously.
And a shoe left behind.
Yeah. One shoe.
Actually, that's the other role that Parker plays in this, is to be the the person who is suspected of playing
Oh.
a rather overzealous prank, isn't he? Because he's made some mention of a ritual of kidnapping the bride.
Yes. So Kling doesn't know what to make of it. He thinks that they've actually gone and done it. That they've kidnapped the bride. But then the shoe is the clue of like, well, why would she only have one shoe on now?
Mm-hmm.
Then ensues the investigation. Then I suppose, pretty
Yeah.
much straight away.
He does. So he confides in Steve Carella first and foremost, and Steve sort of checks and puts together the pieces that this is a kidnapping, something has happened, and then it becomes a full police operation. After he's talked to a fella called Bill Bailey, who's insists on referring to the song "Won't You Come Home, Bill Bailey" all the time. Which then Fat Ollie later picks
Of
up and just
course.
calls him that as his full title.
Yeah.
Is that the guy who sees the van at the back?
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yes.
yeah, that's how they figure out how they've
Yeah.
got Augusta out the building.
So they know that a van came at a strange time of night because a guy saw it, not very clearly because it's through sort of grease-stained windows,
Yeah,
but he knows that a van turned up and it must have been that took her away.
a white van.
A white van.
Yeah, he's another one of those nicely kind of, like, fairly quickly but quite nicely sketched incidental characters in the Mr. Bailey.
He is, yeah.
A classic McBain character.
Yeah.
It's nice when they return to him later on, which we
Come
can talk
back.
about in a bit.
But yeah, the investigation begins in earnest. And like we say, Captain Frick makes a rare appearance in a crime scene, essentially. And they just sit him in a chair, basically. And I just like that the interplay in that section's brilliant.
Yeah, it is
Yeah,
very
it's
good.
cracking.
Because he thinks it's a burglary, doesn't he? But then he's like, everyone else is very sceptical that a burglar would have chloroform with them and kidnap somebody.
Well, and not burgle anything.
But it's interesting how the captain of the police precinct is sort of put in a chair and sort of say, you just sit there and I'm not... yeah. He's sort of entertained like a slightly bizarre relative.
Yeah, he's definitely a bit senile, isn't he? And a bit kind of over the hill, definitely.
Yeah. So they sort of have to manage him in the space by putting him somewhere, so saying, yeah, well, possibly that, but maybe not.
Although they make him to make himself believe that he's come up with the idea of how the investigation's going to...
Yeah. But no one can really agree on quite what the crime is because there's no ransom call.
No.
So they're all set up ready to tape the phone calls if someone does come in and ring up and make a ransom request. But it never comes, so they've got nothing to go on.
And they are, to be honest, a bit scrambling around until Fat Ollie arrives in the squad room and lends his assistance.
Yeah. And in the meantime, Augusta has been kidnapped and we see that she's been blindfolded and someone's threatening her with a scalpel, basically.
Oh, yeah.
So the scalpel's an important part of this because that's why she's terrified.
So you get that for the rest of the book, don't you? Cutaway scenes with her in this room.
Yeah. Which is an uncommon feature in the series, I think, to have a second thread sort of cut away to a completely non-cop based story.
Yeah. I
So
suppose it is.
she's going through the ringer a bit with this person that's kidnapped her.
A blonde-haired guy with a German accent.
Yes.
I guess initially she doesn't even particularly know that, does she? Because she's all taped up, can't see anything, can't speak. Dear me.
Yeah. She's not having a good time with it.
No, not at all.
So the police are trying to get stuff started, and then one of the ways they do that is go off to see their stool pigeons. So we have the return of Danny Gimp, who's now carrying a sword cane, which is a great method of defence in like mid-70s New York, essentially. It's like, what are you going to do with that? Someone's after you. I don't think the sword cane's going to help you, is it?
I was very sceptical about these stool pigeons because as if in a city of 6 million people, I don't know.
Well, I think it's because they're local to the area, isn't it?
suppose so.
But that's the key. And he does talk about the value of them to the police in quite some detail in this little section. But I know what you mean. I've always thought that when you have a stool pigeon in a police show, it's like, do they really? Unless you're going for something very specific and you know that they know someone. It's like, can you just put your ear to the ground and what?
Find a... Yeah.
But maybe that's the power of informers.
Well, maybe.
Because, so Hal Willis goes to see Fats Donner. Tubby Comfort.
Good old Tubby Comfort.
But Arthur Brown goes off to see a new one.
Oh,
a new
yeah. He was
informer
quite
we've
fun,
not had
wasn't he?
before, which is the Gaucho, or the Cowboy. His first appearance, and he definitely comes in
I was going to say... he's
quite a
in-
lot more
yeah.
from here on in. So, a new character to keep tabs on as we go through. But they all return a couple of leads for them to follow up
Yeah.
as the story goes on.
Lines of investigation. Well, they've come up with a short list of 2 disgruntled...
Yeah. People who Kling's put away or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or shot. The family
Ex-cons
of-
who are now out of prison and bear a grudge. So they use the stool pigeons to track these couple of individuals down.
Yeah, one of whom is...
From Switzerland with a, so...
Yeah, you've got one of them who's the guy from the end of Sadie When She Died.
Yeah.
Kling killed his brother when he was getting the snot kicked out of him. And yeah, a guy who's been threatening to get revenge on a cop. And they think it's really going to be really, really bad. This guy's like, yeah, I'll
the
show
guy.
that cop
I
a
love
thing
that.
or two.
Yeah, he's a good classic McBain idiotic character, isn't he?
Yeah. Well, what happens? What's his form of revenge he's going to take?
His form of revenge is massively inconveniencing himself for no purpose whatsoever,
Yeah.
other than in his own head.
Yeah.
So the beat cop's been fined him for storing cardboard boxes on non-waste collection days, and so his revenge is not to put any. So he starts, doesn't he, put him out on waste day, and then he just stops and saves about a month's worth of waste up, and then puts it out all on one day. And he's like explaining this to whoever it is, Corella or whoever, and they're just like, right, okay, wasn't that really inconvenient? Oh yeah, it was really inconvenient, but I got my revenge. And you're just thinking,
Yeah.
very strange. He's a properly strange character, that guy.
Yeah.
Love it.
And then, they're trying to find this girl who's probably, going to get killed if they don't find her, and they're coming across someone like that. Talk about inconveniencing people.
Yeah, the passage says something like, yeah, it was his explanation was also really boring.
But Fat Ollie, I mean,
Yeah.
he's back with a vengeance.
Wow.
He sure is.
He just walks in, he's like, oh, I just heard about this, and I've got an idea.
Yeah, it's like, if you guys are trying to keep this a secret, forget it.
I think this is the story that really establishes Fat Ollie as the character he is.
Does the other one end up with him saying he's going to join the 8-7?
Yeah, he keeps saying...
Does that happen in pretty much every one he's ever in? Because
Yeah.
they seem to, yeah.
I like you guys. I'm going to see if I get a
Yeah.
transfer to the 8-7. But yeah, he's come down. He's heard it on the grapevine that something's happened to a cop's wife, and it's like, yeah. But he's such a good cop.
Yeah.
He's the one who's willing to put in the really hard work.
Yep.
So he has the idea to go through all the photographs and match up everyone in it, make sure they could see if this person was at the wedding.
Yeah.
They can identify him, and it's going to take a lot of work. But he just does it.
Yep.
And Corella's like, stay out of it. And then eventually he's like, oh, actually, it's quite a good idea.
Yeah.
It's like, send the bigot off to do this stuff. And it's just fantastic. It's very frustrating to have to like a character that's so repulsive
Yeah.
in almost every sense. But although in this story, his bigotry isn't on full display.
No, they get a bit in early just to remind you that he is a bigot, and then kind of let him just get on with police work after that, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit more of a workman-like performance from him, isn't it?
He's going off doing all this stuff with the photographs. And a lot of the 8-7 cops are thinking it's still a kidnapping that's going to have a ransom. And they're waiting for this. But poor Augusta Blair, so eventually she's like, her blindfold and her bindings are cut, and she's offered food by this strange man, but she doesn't really know where she is, and she keeps saying that no one will hear you if you scream, and things like that. And then eventually sort of wheels out a load of clothes. It's like, I want you to wear these because you wore them in a magazine shoot once. Do you remember? So, instant psycho.
Yeah. It was that moment she realised he was insane. Something it says.
It's essentially that, isn't it? You just don't know where it's going to go from there.
No. Yeah, but he has a scalpel, this guy, doesn't he? So is that a bit of a clue about him? Maybe.
Well, it is.
Maybe.
And one of the ways that she works out how gives herself a chance, though, she thinks he's insane, and so she's like, I've got to go to the toilet, and he's so repulsed by the idea of the human process of waste removal, he's like, ugh, and leaves her alone, and she buys herself a little bit of time. So she clearly knows that he's bonkers. The tip-off that comes from Danny Gimp is about a guy who's got a gun, been going around with a gun, and they go to find him, a guy called Manny Ball.
Oh, yeah, the Swiss guy.
Yeah.
So you're a bit suspicious about him because you know about the German accent and you think, oh, Manfred Ball.
And they eventually find out where he lives, and they go in his room's just full of loads of bottles of whiskey. And they're like, why? And the landlord or landlady, whoever's like, I don't know, perhaps I could keep it.
Well, he's ex-room, so he's not there anymore. So he's cleared out, but he's left
all the
a
bottles.
dozen unopened bottles of whiskey.
Which leads them... Luckily, it's a brand of whiskey that has the name of the shop that it was bought at on it, which is a bit...
Yeah, like little labels.
Yeah.
Which they might have done.
Well, possibly. So it means that they go to this shop and end up in a sort of a stakeout. In the middle of this investigation, they end up accidentally staking out somewhere.
Was the explanation for that they thought he was staking that shop out to rob?
Yeah, so they talk to the shop owner. He's like, yeah, he comes in at the same time every day. And they're like, pattern. So he's buying this stuff every day or whatever it is at the same time. So they wait for him. Because conveniently they've got there just before the time that he's going to come in. And then they collar him. But accidentally get him too quickly because he hasn't pulled his gun yet. So they can't get him for holding up the store.
No. But presumably they scared him off from trying.
Yeah. They just have him on firearms offence, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's all sorts going on. And I think the thing that's interesting with this then is, obviously what's going to happen is we discover along with Augusta that when she somehow manages to get out of her room, this guy's gone off to work. So he tells her, I've got to go to work. So she knows she's got a certain amount of time. So she uses a little bit of MacGyvering to get out of this locked room.
She unscrews some hinges or something, doesn't she?
Yeah, so uses a coat hanger or something to get the hinges off the door.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Fat Ollie is gone around getting van and lorry pamphlets, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Brochures from like dealerships, and he goes back to see what's his chops.
More excellent work from Fat Ollie.
And he shows him loads of pictures of this, and he goes, no, that's not just like that. And trying to work out what this vehicle was through the grimy window. Now, that scene ends quite amusingly, because he spends ages showing him these pictures, and then he was like, it's this one. And he was like, bloody hell, it's an ambulance. He could have bloody told us it was an ambulance, not a white van.
I've been speculating about it being a milk truck or a laundry truck. And...
Oh, no, it's just a door at the back. Oh, right, okay. So then they realise it's an ambulance.
So parts are sort of starting to come together.
Something else happens around that time.
Well, what happens is they discover there's a roll of film that hadn't been developed.
Oh,
it's the
that's
roll
right,
of film left in the photographer's camera at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So he develops it and brings in these pictures, and there's someone on there that they can't identify.
And they zoom in on him, don't they?
They've got a really good zoom. And this is a bit like with stool pigeons. I'm always a bit dubious about how well you can zoom into a photograph. I mean, presumably, if conditions are right, they could do what they do here, which is zoom in so close on a guy who's in the back of a photo that you can see a ring that he's wearing on his hand and read what is on the ring, which tells them that he comes from Ramsey University.
So it'd have to be pretty close up to start with, you would think.
Yeah,
wouldn't you?
you'd think so. And incredibly high definition, which I mean,
Isn't it? It's
I
the
don't
photo
know.
that Kling took, though, isn't it? It's the photo of
Yes.
the photographer with Augusta
Yeah,
that he asked Kling to take.
Because it's the only photo on the roll that's in the hotel rather than at the reception, so we can see that the person that they couldn't identify from the church is also at the...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they've got Ramsey University, they've got ambulance, access to chloroform.
Yeah.
They've got an approximate age just from the
Someone who saw him at the wedding.
yeah.
And so now they've got Ramsey, they troop off to Ramsey University with his photo, don't they, essentially?
Yeah.
And then
So-
things end up happening very quickly.
Start looking through yearbooks based on the approximation of the age, don't they? And
Yeah. That all happens quite quickly as
It,
well.
Oh,
it
yeah.
You
does.
get lucky again.
There's a bit of slight kind of mismatching of the timelines as well to make you think that there's absolutely no way in hell that this investigation is going to bear fruit before the critical moment, as it were.
Yeah, because you're stuck at 3:25 to 3:30
Yeah,
for
and
quite
at that
a long
point,
time.
at that point, it seems like Steve Carell is still in the university, idly leafing through yearbooks, and you think this isn't going to go well.
No.
But apparently, that must have all happened a little bit earlier. I think, really.
Well, on the subject of timelines, and this was mentioned by someone on Twitter, is how long does this investigation take? Well, the wedding and the reception starts on Sunday, the 10th of November. So the investigation into the kidnapping begins the early morning, Monday, the 11th of November.
Mm-hmm.
We have loads of stuff happens through Monday. The Tuesday is the day where they're mainly doing the follow-up on the tip-offs from the stool pigeons. And by Wednesday, we get all this stuff we're talking about here. So
Oh,
basically
right.
everything happens on the Wednesday. So
Oh,
it starts
so
on a Sunday. Wednesday is the day that this ends. So it's literally a
3
small
days,
window
yeah.
of time. But Augusta's got out of her room while this is all going on and discovered it's a shrine
Yeah.
to her classic Psycho.
Yeah.
It's just covered in pictures of her from magazine shoots and the like.
We have Alan Partridge
I was going to
moment,
say,
and his
Yeah, Alan,
he's super fan and all the
you're a mentalist.
yeah. So she's a bit freaked out by that,
yeah,
of course.
'cause
Understandably.
he's already told her before he went off to work that he's coming back to clean her up so they can get married.
Yeah, and then he can.
Married, make love, and then I'm going to slit your throat. He says.
Delightful.
Yeah.
So she's just got out the room that she's in, but not the apartment,
Yeah.
hasn't she? So she's kind of loose in the apartment
Yeah.
when he gets
the
back.
apartment, I think, also has a deadbolt that can only be opened with the key, doesn't it? So
she's still trapped
but
in
she's
there.
pretty resourceful. She does a good job, actually. It's quite nice that she isn't just a kind of helpless damsel in distress, and she does actually kind of do a pretty good job of getting right together
Yeah.
and breaking out of that room. She's quite impressive, I think.
Yeah, it's just taken her longer than she thinks because she's got no idea what the time is. So she doesn't know until the last minute that she's sort of run out of time because he's told her, I will be back at 3:30. She didn't know what 3:30 was until she got out of the room and could see something else. And she sort of... But you think it's all going to go horribly, horribly wrong. But this guy does want to marry her.
Oh, he does.
So, yeah, she suffered his hands upon her is the phrase he uses because he bathes her.
Oh.
But yeah, yuck. So literally the last chapter in the book, chapter 13, is everything happens in that. You've got Bill Bailey identifying the ambulance. You got the photographer coming back with the pictures. They've got Ramsey University. You've got Augusta being dressed for her wedding, in air quotes. You've got the guy, the kidnapper, basically saying, "Oh yeah, I was kicked out of medical school because I mutilated a cadaver."
Yeah. He seems quite proud about that, doesn't he?
Yeah, he seems quite pleased with himself.
Then he
Yeah.
starts going on about his mum, doesn't he?
Yes, he's
And-
got some issues, it's fair to say.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, the police are ringing around all the hospitals and healthcare places to try and work out if this guy works there, and places where you'd have access to an ambulance. So that's the only narrowing down they can do, really. And of course, he does rape Augusta at the end of it, or tries to. It's very hard to define rape. The act of rape was just because he couldn't get a hard on. It's not
Yeah.
rape. It is rape.
Yes, absolutely.
essentially. But he's like, yeah, well, might as well kill you now. So, and then the door bursts open.
Fat Ollie shoots him.
Yeah, heroic Fat Ollie.
And it's a very interesting thing because it does set up a psychological sort of issue for the future of Augusta and Bert's life together, in that he makes it clear that Steve and Bert didn't open fire on this guy.
Well, he's like about to stab her, isn't
Yeah,
he? So
and they
he's like
hesitate.
lunging at, and they hesitate, but Fat Ollie doesn't for a second.
So there's something there, sort of like, why wouldn't you have killed him, husband?
Yeah.
I'm sure that won't come back to bite them, and everything from here on in. Once they can go off on honeymoon now. They've had a lovely time.
Finally,
Yeah.
everything's going to be plain sailing for the Klings.
Yeah.
Phew.
That was a very spoilery look through the
Yeah,
book.
well,
There's no way to do it otherwise.
Well, yeah. If you can't talk about what happens in this one,
Yeah.
there's not a huge amount to talk about.
So if you don't want to know what happens in the book, please ignore the
Rewind,
preceding
yeah.
podcast.
Yeah. Oh. Right. Well, we better sum up then. Really, we better make our decisions on grading this sort of thing
Tricky.
as well. Because
Well.
we've been on a bit of an upward trend with the scores.
The one thing I was going to say, though,
Go on.
I bet there's no reproductions of anything or photos or
That's very
anything.
true,
I bet
actually.
there's very, very few entries in the canon
I think
that have none.
I don't know if I'm right. I feel like this would probably score relatively low in 87 Precinct Bingo. There's
Yeah. Despite it having loads of sort of in-world references and loads of cops, but actually a lot of the things. Well, yeah, you say that, but then there are 2 or 3 like little moments of vignettes where he's talking about the difference between the hotels, like where they go into one hotel to find
I
somebody.
guess, yeah.
It's very much like city history,
I suppose
all
so,
that sort
yeah.
of stuff in there, which is very good. But
Yeah. It would be moderate to low, I would think,
Yeah.
compared to the others. That's an observation for what it's worth.
oh, it's worth its weight in gold, as always. So how are we going to score this then?
Well, I can't score anything without
You can have a look
the
at Kenneth.
Kenneth printout. Morgan can go first this week, I would think.
Ah.
Or you, Paul.
Oh, don't say that.
Oh, there we go. Look at that.
let's have a look.
I like.
They are currently reading the scores.
So okay. Right. Well, there you
Right,
go. Morgan.
okay. Well, I mean, I did find this to be enjoyable. As I say, although there are points where I think it possibly somewhat stretches credibility, it was definitely not as daft as the other wedding-themed
No, not by a long
novel,
chalk.
not by a long chalk. And it's always good to have a good Fat Ollie story, and this is definitely one of those. Quite an engaging sort of creepy psychopath as well, which keeps the interest up.
European baddies always good. Good value for money in American things.
Your creepy European psychopath is always good. So yeah, enjoyable. Not necessarily an absolute sort of classic standout within the series. Missing a few of the things that I'd sometimes look for in one of these, but I feel like it's going to, for me, the score's going to go down from our previous few. So I'm probably going to go in at somewhere in the region of, let's say, 68 police shields.
68 police shields from Morgan. I will go next.
Oof. Last.
Well, you get prime spot this
know,
time.
yeah.
I remembered this story as being worse than actually I thought it was when I reread it. I really enjoyed rereading it, but that's probably because I'm so absorbed in the world of the 87th Precinct now. I've got all the little references to enjoy. So as a fan, it's nice to read it and get all those little, see all those faces, look at those references back to other
Yeah, I
faces.
suppose if you're reading it out of sequence, none of that would really mean anything to you, would it?
But it does lack certain precinctness for my liking. There's just a few too many. Does that make sense? Yeah, a few too many coincidences. A few coincidences too many.
Yes.
I'm tired.
It's the German character. You say
Yeah,
the
I'm doing
sentence
the-
backwards.
I'm doing the eye out of the door must go sequence.
Coincidences many, they are too fewly many.
Essentially that. So I love it. It's a good book, but it's not going to be a high scorer from me. In fact, I'm just going to score it 60 police shields.
Oof. Okay.
Yeah.
So
I think it
over to you,
lacks
Steve-O.
it lacks a certain meatiness somehow, and I'm not really sure what I mean by that. But
I think I know.
I feel like I know too.
it's not quite difficult to put your finger. I did enjoy it reading it back, and perhaps like you a bit more than I thought, because I think I remember the other wedding one more. I remember that being really daft, but it does rattle along nicely, as I said at the beginning, and you're quite engaged to find out how on earth they're going to suss it all out in time. But yeah, it just lacks a bit of the breadth that some of the others have, really.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking exactly the same score as you, actually, 60.
Right.
I would say.
That gives us, using our patented rounding down system, 62 police shields for this one.
62, there we go.
That seems
Okay,
fair.
so how does that compare?
Well, lower quartile, I would say.
Lower quartile.
For 62 will be about... so
Let's do
amongst
live
the
analysis.
half dozen lowest scored, I would say. Which
I don't know. I mean, most of these are pretty strong, even if they're in the lower quartile, aren't they?
Exactly.
It's a cracking, exciting little read, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
but it feels like a little read rather than, whereas some of the more recent entries have been quite sort of, you feel like
stick in your mind, and you're like, oof.
yeah, you feel like he's kind of expanding a bit, and they're getting a little bit more complex, and there's a bit more depth. And this one doesn't really have that, I think.
Yeah, if you go into your bookcase and lend us one of these to read, you wouldn't be.
It
picking
wouldn't be
this
the
one.
first one you'd grab now.
No, definitely not. But like I say, rewarding for the series reader.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
I think in its little place keeps things ticking over.
Definitely.
Okie dokie. Well, that's So Long As You Both Shall Live from 1976. We will return with a bonus episode, and we will next be doing the book number 32, Long Time No See, which I haven't read for ages, so I'm looking forward to getting stuck into that as the next one.
So the title's quite apt then, really, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's very apt, Steve. Well spotted. Right. So in the meantime...
Just an observation.
It was a very good observation. One of your gold standards. In the meantime, I am going to say goodbye, and I'll do it like this. Goodbye.
Fairly well.
Goodbye.
Bye.